Hello my friends, glad to be back. Today is 3rd of December, Sunday, so I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Now it's 10:30 in the morning Moscow time. I'm Levan Gudadze and this is my first update for the day in which I will share all the main news that are making headlines in Russian media outlets and Russian language pages on different internet platforms for this moment. Second update will be a little bit late on my Patreon page, in which I will share additional news that will be reported by Russian media during the day, and also I will share on Patreon video footage of evenings Moscow with all that New Year's lights. Hopefully Patreon community will find that update interesting. And also, dear friends, also 7 o'clock today, 7 o'clock in the evening today, Moscow time, I will have a live stream, traditional Sunday live stream, in which we can have a conversation about any topic, we will find interesting, or any topic that members of our community will find interesting. As we always do, it's news summary, short news summary, and also friendly chat. And during the live stream I will also share with you this compilation of short videos that we made yesterday in Moscow. Me and my family were in Moscow yesterday, as you know, if you watched yesterday's walk and talk video. And well, hopefully that live stream also will be interesting for our community. That's been said, let's talk about news now. Once again, dear friends, live stream today, 7 o'clock in the evening, Moscow time. And now let's talk about news. First of all, short summary of the situation on Ukrainian battlefield. According to reports from Russian media, Russian military channels and defense ministry, there was no crucial changes on any of the sectors of the front line. It's mainly artillery duels between the sides, excuse me, reckoning force operations, local scale skirmishes, nothing in the scale that can influence overall situation on any of the sectors of the front line. Operational pause mainly is holding, although of course we have several hotspots that I will talk about little in more detail. First of all, of course, Marinki. Last several days, this settlement is constantly in discussion on different channels, because a few days ago Russian militaries that are operating in Marinki did share this video from the settlement and claimed that entire Marinki is under Russian control, although some channels, including Russian channels by the way, did share information that several streets or several buildings even on the northern western part of Marinki, in this small area here, still under control of Ukrainian forces. Some Ukrainian military personnel is still there, or was there at least yesterday, and therefore, technically speaking, Marinka cannot be called as under full Russian control. Although, by the way, I don't share this take on the situation. Just imagine if like one platoon somehow managed to enter, let's say, Bakhmut and establish control over the one or two buildings. Do we start talking about Bakhmut as a somewhat disputed city? Of course not. Bakhmut is under full Russian control and will be under full Russian control, even if somehow one platoon of Ukrainian units or two platoons did manage to enter the city and establish control over the one or two buildings. So same goes for Marinka. Marinka is under full Russian control. Maybe one building somewhere or two buildings, whatever is left from those buildings is still somewhat controlled by few Ukrainian military personnel, but it don't really change overall situation, isn't it? Marinka is under Russian control, and only a matter of days, I believe, and Russian forces will activate their offensive operations in direction of Pobeda, this settlement on the southern flank of Marinka. And also I expect Russian forces to conduct pincer offensive in direction of Georgievka, this settlement here, by the way. It's just a few days, give it a few days, and we will see this type of operations. It seems logical to me. And of course, Krasnogorovka, by the way, I expect Russian forces to become more active in direction of Krasnogorovka. So This is my take on Marinka. Marinka is under full Russian control. Maybe some building somewhere is, maybe in some ruins of building somewhere in the northern western part, several Ukrainian military personnel is trapped and don't know what to do, but it does not change this big picture. So battle for Marinka effectively has ended with 100% Russian success. That's it. Of course, also hotspot on Donetsk sector of the front line is Avdiivka, southern flank, let's say, of Donetsk sector. In Avdiivka, Russian forces are conducting these local scale offensive operations on regular basis and are increasing pressure on Ukrainian forces. I expect in 2-3 weeks time to see large scale or final assault of Russian forces on Avdiivka when lack of reinforcement, lack of munition, and lack of any supplies whatsoever, and weather conditions simultaneously will finally deteriorate battle capabilities of Ukrainian units in such scale that during the Russian offensive final push on Avdiivka, we will see big Ukrainian units lay down arms, surrender on the scale of battalions, by the way, because already hundreds of Ukrainian soldiers surrender in this area, but that's not enough. I expect battalions to surrender during this final push for Avdiivka, which will take place, in my understanding, in this month, in December. Also, dear friends, northern flank of Donetsk sector, Bakhmut area is quite active recent days, and Russian forces conducted local-scale offensive operations on both southern and northern flanks of Bakhmut. In the southern flank, Russian units are improving their positions in Andreevka, Klishevka areas, these two settlements here. And on the northern flank, Russian forces established control over the Berkhovka water reservoir area and moved even further. And now, even this pro-Ukrainian map, by the way, is forced to acknowledge that forward units of Russian armed forces are inside the Bogdanovka settlement, which is in between Chisov Yar and Bakhmut. I reported about it several days ago that forward units of Russian forces were on outskirts of Bogdanovka, and according to some reports, even in the village itself. And well, we did receive several confirmations from several channels that it is the case. And yet again, even this pro-Ukrainian map is forced to acknowledge this. Overall, still it's operational pause all along the front line. Nothing is happening at this point, despite this severe local-scale clashes between the sides. Nothing is happening that will influence overall situation on one or another sector of the front line in immediate future. Of course, Kherson direction is also somewhat active, although hostilities have decreased a little bit in comparison to previous weeks, maybe because Kiev regime finally realized that they are sending militaries in the trap on the left bank. Maybe officers on the right bank of the Kherson region did realize that they are sending their military personnel into Russian trap by forcing them to cross the Dnieper River. Maybe introduction by Russian forces new type of weapons, for example, drones, FPV drones and Lansen drones with capabilities to strike nighttime also play some role, or maybe all these factors and some others combined did force Ukrainian side to decrease its activity when it comes to these attempts to cross the Dnieper River. But for whatever the reason, it seems like Ukrainian forces in this area finally ran out of steam, and all they are trying to do now is to somewhat maintain foothold on the left bank. But yet again, question is why? What is the point, and why they are still sacrificing lives on daily basis for this irrelevant, absolutely irrelevant footholds that were allowed by Russian forces just because Russian side was planning to create this trap. I don't know, you tell me. But yet again, right next to destroyed Antonovsky Bridge and the railway bridge, and also in Aleshki area, by the way, this small settlement, central part of these small settlements, several platoons of Ukrainian units are still there. Maybe little more, but yet again, they are unable to achieve anything whatsoever. Situation is under full Russian control, and I remind you, dear friends, that according to reports that I see on different military channels, since the beginning of activization of Ukrainian side on Kherson direction, they lost about 2,000 military personnel without achieving anything whatsoever. I will repeat myself that these small footholds that Kyiv regime has on the left bank was allowed by Russian side so that a trap will be created. So no one should be mistaken and think that, Kyiv regime did manage to achieve some success, at least by creating these small footholds. No, man. No. The Russian side allowed these footholds to exist in bigger, because Russian side had a bigger plan to create a trap, and Russian side succeed in this. And at least one, and the Kyiv regime lost at least one brigade during these recent activities in Kherson region. If we combined all the casualties among manpower and all the losses in military equipment that Kyiv regime had, not just on the left bank, but mainly on the right bank, by the way, because this high concentration of Ukrainian forces in Kherson region, on the right bank of Kherson region, did allow Russian Air Force and Russian long-range artillery to conduct devastating missile and bomb strikes on points of concentration of Ukrainian units and their military equipment. And this is it for a short summary of situation on Ukrainian battlefield. As I said, nothing is happening at this point that can influence overall situation. It's operational pause, in my understanding, and it will stay this way until Russian Defense Ministry, Russian General Staff will authorize large-scale offensive operations, which will begin somewhere in late January, in beginning of February, in my understanding. That's been said. Before I continue, dear friends, let me thank all of you for your time and attention. Without you, this channel definitely would not exist. Not just this channel, but channels, by the way, on this project, on YouTube, Rumble, and Telegram. And of course, special thank to members of our community who supports my work with donations through PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, and by subscribing to my Patreon page. Thank you very much. Let's continue with the additional news now. And RIA Novosti is reporting that early hours of today, some explosions were heard in Sumy, which is the northern eastern part of Ukraine, let's say, that borders Russian Federation. Russian armed forces are quite active in bordering areas to neutralize Ukrainian forces that are participating in constant shelling of Russian territories. And I guess these strikes in Sumy direction was one of those operations of Russian forces to neutralize artillery systems of Ukrainian military personnel or points of concentration of manpower and military equipment. Also, TASS news agency is reporting that according to Russian Defense Ministry, Russian forces managed to repel 3 Ukrainian counteroffensives in the Krasny Liman direction. Offensives were conducted by units of 60th, 63rd, and 67th Ukrainian brigades, and as a result of these clashes, Ukrainian side lost about 100 military personnel and retreated on initial positions without achieving any success on the battlefield. As I said many times before, dear friends, Ukrainian side, Kyiv regime basically forces Ukrainian military personnel to conduct on daily basis these local scale suicidal offensive operations in attempt to regain initiative on any of their directions, especially in the northern sectors where situation for Ukrainian brigades are catastrophic. But yet again, Russian side, time after time, repels these Ukrainian local-scale offensives by simultaneously bringing significant damage to Ukrainian manpower and military equipment. Also, RIA Novosti is reporting that on South Donetsk direction, according to Russian Defense Ministry, Ukrainian side lost 110 military personnel as a result of local scale skirmishes. And when it comes to casualty numbers on the front line, yesterday Russian Defense Ministry did share information about weekly results of the clashes. You can I did share on my Telegram page this reports from Russian Defense Ministry. You can check it. I will just share with you some little part of this report. And well, according to Russian Defense Ministry, since the 25th November up to 2nd of December, Ukrainian forces on the Kupiansk direction lost 315 military personnel, 2 tanks, 8 armored fighting vehicles, and 15 motor vehicles, 7 field artillery guns. Also, on Krasny Liman direction, where we did see significant increase in activities, in hostilities between the side. In Krasny Liman direction, during the clashes in previous week, Ukrainian forces lost about 950 military personnel, 7 armored fighting vehicles, 21 motor vehicles, and 21 motor vehicles. In Donetsk direction, during the clashes in the previous week, Ukrainian side lost 1,680 military personnel, 6 tanks, 6 armored fighting vehicles, 31 motor vehicles, and 19 field artillery guns. In South Donetsk direction, units of the Vostok group of forces repelled several attacks of Ukrainian armed forces. And well, basically during the clashes, Ukrainian side overall in previous week lost 880 military personnel, 1 tank, 6 armored fighting vehicles, 20 motor vehicles, and 5 field artillery guns. Zaporozhye direction, Ukrainian forces lost 315 military personnel, 7 armored fighting vehicles, 5 tanks, 21 motor vehicles, as well as 5 field artillery systems. And finally, Kherson direction, Ukrainian side lost about 450 military personnel in just 1 week, 13 field artillery guns on the right bank of the river, of course, because Ukrainian forces were unable to transfer heavy military equipment to the left bank, to those small footholds. Also, 23 boats were destroyed of Ukrainian forces, 26 motor vehicles also on the right bank, and 2 sabotage and recognition groups of Ukrainian armed forces were neutralized. And that's when it comes to reports about casualties on Ukrainian side during the previous week. As we can see, each week Ukrainian side combined, if you combine all the data, losing 1 or 2 brigades, by the way. If you combine casualties among manpower and the military equipment, that's how severe casualties on Ukrainian side are. And now let's continue with some additional news. And of course this topic, article from Seymour Hersh, award-winning US journalist, does makes its waves, and I will closely monitor Russian media outlets today on possible reactions from Russian high-ranking officials on revelations that we see in Seymour Hersh's article. Let me read what TASS news agency did write about this. So Seymour Hersh announced peace negotiations between the Russian Federation and Ukraine at the military level. Moscow and Kiev are conducting secret negotiations at the level of Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Valery Zaluzhny, and the Chief of General Staff of Armed Forces of Russian Federation, Valery Gerasimov. This statement was made in his article by U.S. journalist, Pulitzer Prize winner Seymour Hersh, citing sources in American administration, in U.S. administration, as well as Americans familiar with the situation in Ukrainian government. The driving driving force behind those negotiations was Washington, not Washington or Moscow, not a US president or Russian president, but two high-ranking generals who are fighting the war. Valery Gerasimov from Russia and Valery Zaluzhny from Ukraine. He wrote on his blog on Substack. Well, let's unpack here this part of this news. When it comes to negotiations between Russia and Russian and Ukrainian military, nothing new here, absolutely, because we did see at least several instances when POWs were exchanged between the sides, and of course there can be no exchange of POWs if sides have no lines of communication. So lines of communication was always there between Russian military and the Ukrainian military. I guess some lines of communication also exist between secret services of two sides. Maybe exactly to conduct some POW exchanges, for example, or for some other reasons, but lines of communication always exists during the conflict, no matter which side is conflicting. Even in the Middle East, by the way, Israel and Palestine do have lines of communication through Qatar, through some other countries maybe, but they still are able to communicate. So in this part, we have no questions. I have no questions. I can understand that directly or indirectly, Zaluzhny and Gerasimov are in communication. When it comes to this second part, that these negotiations were initiated by these two generals, and Putin and Biden were, kind of sidelined or were not involved in this process. It's impossible. It's impossible. I don't know about Ukraine. Zaluzhny and Zelensky do have some strange relationships. Let's say they are in conflict at this point. It's not even strange. It's open conflict now between Zelensky and Zaluzhny. So maybe Zaluzhny did not share information with Zelensky. That's a possibility. But here in Russia, situation is very different, and I'm quite sure Gerasimov will not conduct any negotiations with nobody without consultations with the head of state, with Putin. So in this regards, I have to disagree already. I'm quite sure Putin is very much informed and involved in negotiations, if these negotiations even are happening. But let's continue now. As Hersh points out, citing an official, there is no question in the American administration that key American figures pushed Zaluzhny, to the decision to negotiate. Okay, I can agree with this. Zaluzhny, of course, is under influence of London and Washington, and I guess all the major steps that Zaluzhny makes, like any other high-ranking figure in Ukraine, are coordinated or directed from Washington and London. So yet again, in this case, I have no questions. But let's continue. The agreement, according to journalists, so we are now talking about what topics have been discussed between the sides and how this agreement between the sides may look. And that's the most important part here. So agreement, according to journalists, assumes that Crimea will remain Russian and presidential elections will be held in the liberated territories that become part of Russia. At the same time, Russia, according to Hersh, will not prevent Ukraine from joining NATO, but on the condition that NATO troops will not be on Ukrainian soil. In addition, the North Atlantic Alliance will be prohibited from deploying offensive weapons in Ukraine. And well, here in this topic I definitely have some issues, because nothing that I just read that was written by Hersh, based on his sources, nothing from this makes any sense from Russian point of view. Nothing. Because Russian side is winning this fight against Western ruling class. Initiative is in Russian hand. Ukrainian armed forces are crumbling. They have severe issues with manpower, military equipment, training, just name it, with everything, financing and so on. Simultaneously, Western ruling elites have also significant issues, because fatigue of Ukraine definitely began to play its role in the West. We can clearly see it, isn't it? I mean, there's so many publications now with somewhat criticism of Kyiv regime, and also we have some data when it comes to show studies of public opinion in the Western states, and less and less people in the Western states are too keen to spend even more billions of taxpayers' money on Kyiv regime, especially since many of them probably began realizing that this conflict was provoked by West, and money from the West have been sent to most corrupt regime in Europe, and one of the most corrupt regimes in the world. So, yet again, more information Western society will have, better decisions they will make, and better understanding they will have about all this situation, and of course questions will also rise. So Russia in all the fronts, man, all the fronts, media front, battle front, economical front, just on all fronts, international relationships front, Russian side is winning on all the fronts. If you remember, one of the goals for Western ruling class was to, for example, isolate Russia. But at this point, we can probably say, with a certain level of I mean, at this point, we can clearly say that Russia definitely is not isolated, but Western world did become somewhat isolated from the rest of the world, isn't it? Because these actions of Western states, attacks on Russian pipelines, sanction wars, attempts to steal Russian frozen assets, and many more. These steps definitely force rest of the world to somewhat stay away from the West. Is it true, isn't it? And in other hand, Russia is nowhere to be isolated. There are constantly some forums in Russia, forums outside of Russia, when Russia is an active participant. So Russia is very much part of the global community, when Western world is beginning to become a kind of separate world on this planet, with its political, military and economical systems and geopolitical goals. So, as I said, Russia is in no position to compromise on anything when it comes to Ukrainian conflict or relationship with the Western ruling elites who provoked this conflict in the first place. And why Moscow, in these circumstances, will ever agree to freeze this conflict? Because that's what this article of Seymour Hersh is saying. If Russia will maintain control over the just current line territories that are controlled by Russia now, and Kyiv regime will maintain control over the rest of the Ukraine and maintain itself, then well, I don't know. It definitely don't make any sense. Why? In that case, this conflict will become frozen, isn't it? And the Western ruling class will receive time and opportunity to reinforce Kiev regime with more money, more weapons, and sometime in the future, after 5, 7, 10, or 15 years, provoke confrontation again. And why should Moscow ever agree on this? That's, I don't know, man. I have no question. I have no answer on this. And that's why I was thinking maybe US Secret Services conducted some disinformation campaign against Hersh because they don't really like this guy, as I understand. And maybe they try to discredit him by selling this nonsense information to him. Because yet again, I mean, you tell me your opinion, but I said it yesterday in yesterday's update, and I will repeat now that I just see no reason for Moscow to agree on freezing of this conflict because it will damage Russia significantly in the long run. Because in that case, sometime in the future, Russia will again end up in this conflict. Or at least there is high chance of that. And yet again, according to Hersh, Russia will demand from NATO that there will be no offensive weapons in Ukraine, NATO offensive weapons in Ukraine, and Russia will agree Ukraine to become part of NATO. Really? I mean, I don't know, man. I don't think Putin will consider these options, man. Seriously, I just don't see it, man. And this is my take. Let's see yet again how Russian officials will react on this article of Seymour Hersh. They will react one way or another, I guess, in upcoming days. And of course, I will monitor Russian media and I will share with you all the additional news. But let's continue now. Only point on which Russian side can negotiate with Kiev or Western ruling class is an ultimatum that Russia will give Kiev and the West. That entire Ukraine is becoming under Russian control, and Western Ukraine is a problem for the West. Western Ukraine can stay as a Ukraine independent quasi-independent state, or become a part of NATO member states. I don't think Moscow cares about Western Ukraine that much. But rest of the Ukraine, or at least from Kharkiv to Odessa, entire southern and eastern parts of Ukraine, definitely have to become a part of Russia. Definitely. Otherwise, what was the point in the beginning to begin this special military operation at all? Because residents in Odessa region, residents in Kharkiv region, Dnipropetrovsk region, Zaporozhye, they are mostly Russians. And if conflict will be frozen now, those people will become even more pressured by neo-Nazis in Ukraine, isn't it? So I truly find difficult to understand why this whole narrative of this article that Seymour Hersh written. But yet again, let's see how the situation develops. Anyway, according to RIA Novosti, Mayor of Kiev did made a statement about situation in Ukraine while giving an interview to one of the Western media outlets. And let me read several sentences from here. Ukraine's municipal authorities now remain the only independent force in the country, which has grown increasingly authoritarian, aimed the conflict with Russia. The mayor of Kiev, Vitaly Klitschko, has said. Klitschko stressed his assessment of the state of democracy in Ukraine in an interview with German daily Der Spiegel, published on Friday. The country's governing institutions have greatly deteriorated aimed hostility with the local municipal authorities, effectively remaining the only independent force standing, he asserted. Well, interesting statement from Klitschko, because we don't see quite very often criticism of Zelensky and his regime by members of that regime or high-ranking officials, let's say, of modern Ukraine. And Klitschko is definitely a high-ranking official. He is a mayor of Kiev, and he used to have presidential ambitions also. And I guess because this type of statements from former or current high-ranking officials in Ukraine are increasing last several days, maybe week or two, let's say, definitely may be seen as an indicator that because this confrontation between Zelensky and Zaluzhny's camp, these people now, these high-ranking officials, former or current, that are not happy with Zelensky, are looking for testing the ground if they can be received by this new camp that is created very before our eyes around Zaluzhny. So maybe that's what is happening. Some internal trade now between the political figures to maintain power and relevance in Ukrainian politics. That's a possibility, and maybe exactly because of this, Vitaly Klitschko did made quite a strong statement about Zelensky and his associates, because after all, Western ruling class and Western media did spend quite a lot of time by pushing this narrative that Ukraine is democracy, and this democracy have to be helped and supported by Western democracies. And now Mayor of Kiev is openly saying that Ukraine is authoritarian. In Ukraine they have authoritarian regime, and many state institutions are deteriorating significantly, and so on. So, well, it's internal confrontation in Ukraine definitely is intensifying, and I will not be surprised if at some point we will see even gunfights between the parties, between these different camps. One camp is Zelensky, other camp is Zaluzhny, and third camp, in my understanding, is Budanov, and all the clans in Ukraine will concentrate around these three figures, in my understanding. Let's continue now, and RT is reporting that White House official representative did cry about money again, money for Ukraine. Let's read this sentence here. The White House urgently needs supplementary funding to continue supporting Ukraine, U.S. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby has admitted. The official added that the Biden administration effectively only has until the end of the year, until it gets really hard to continue propping up Kiev. Well, this attempt, this kind of statements from White House, from Pentagon, that they have no money, they are running out of money, there is nothing left to support Kiev regime, and so on. Of course, all these statements are made to pressure Republicans in the Congress to make sure that this Biden's 106 billion aid package will pass, and it will at some point. I guess yesterday I did report that U.S. lawmakers will begin discussions around this Biden's aid package from 11th of December. And one way or another, but some funds definitely will be allocated, I guess, for Kiev regime, because after all, this is a last big paycheck for U.S. military-industrial complex, and I just don't see a scenario in which U.S. military contractors will pass on this paycheck and will not push pressure and will not use all their influence to make sure that this Biden's aid package will be passed. Maybe not all 106 billion, from which 63 billion supposed to be for Ukraine, some 15 billion for Israel, 10 billion for Taiwan, and some additional funds for border security and so on, but maybe not all 106 billion will pass, but 60-80 billions probably will be allocated for this military aid package, from which at least 40 billion probably will be for Ukraine. Because, as I said, this is last big paycheck for U.S. military contractors and corrupt officials. And I don't see a scenario when they are saying, you know what, I mean, we had enough. Let's pass on this one. No, they are greedy animals, man. So they will do everything to receive this paycheck. RT is reporting that Germany wants to give less to EU war chest. Also interesting news. So Germany is seeking to reduce its share in the so-called European Peace Facility, a 20 billion euro EU fund, which the bloc has been using almost excessively to prop up Kyiv in its ongoing conflict with Moscow. The Telegraph reported on Friday. Quite interesting. In one hand, Scholz and his government constantly are making statements that they are in full support of Kyiv regime, and they will send more and more money and more weapons, and they do send money and weapons, but same time probably they are forced now to think about political implications of their actions, because elections are not far away, really, and they know that more and more people in Germany are increasingly angry because of the actions of German government, because the economy of Germany is in not the best place at this point, and instead of doing everything to increase economical capacities of Germany and to protect Germany's economy, Scholz and his government are concentrating on Ukraine and how they're gonna fight Russia with the Ukrainian hands. So I don't think all Germans are pleased with this situation. Many of them are not, and at some point, Scholz and his government will be forced to take a step back from this extreme anti-Russian and Russophobic positions, and to act as more or less adequate individuals. And maybe we are seeing first glimpse of that inevitable future, when Germany now is seeking to reduce its participation in this fund, which is basically exclusively have been used for Kyiv regime, to support Kyiv regime. But anyway, let's continue. RT is also reporting that Ukraine counts losses from Polish border blockade. Ukraine's exports through Poland have sharply dropped since the Polish truckers and farmers blocked border crossing in the protests against the EU's trade regulations with the Kyiv, the country's economy ministry announced on Sunday. According to Ukraine's Ministry of Economy, some 282,000 tons of Ukrainian freight transport export passed through the Polish border in November, a 40% decrease from the previous months. The ministry noted that several checkpoints export have almost stopped entirely or have been cut in half. Well, what you gonna say? How are you gonna comment this? Polish truckers and farmers have every right to protect themselves, isn't it? And doing that, if while they are doing that, they will also block flow of finances to Kyiv regime, and also flow of weapons to Kyiv regime. And there was such a report that even military goods were blocked on the border, military equipment. Then, well, I can only applaud Polish truckers and Polish farmers, because less money and less weapons Kyiv regime will receive, less time this conflict will continue in Ukraine, and there will be less casualties and less damage and devastation. So good luck to Polish truckers and farmers, and I guess farmers and truckers in Slovakia will also begin their protests on the border crossing in upcoming days, if they already did not begin, because there was such reports that similar protest actions gonna take place in Slovakia also. Let's continue. RIA Novosti is reporting that well, Israel, by the way, not just renewed military operations in the Gaza Strip, but they renew strikes on southern Lebanon and Syria also. And according to this report, 4 Israeli F-16s did conduct missile strikes in Damascus suburbs. Syrian air defense systems did manage to shut down some aerial targets, but not all of them. And well, usually during these strikes, Israel says that they are targeting proxies of Iran, and this case is not any different. RIA Novosti is reporting that when it comes to Israeli activity in the region and constant shelling of Lebanon and Syria, well, yet again, whenever I hear information about those strikes, I always think when Israel will finally cross a red line for the region, and when we will see further escalation of this conflict, because I'm afraid if Israeli authorities will not stop acting this way by provoking everybody in the region and the worldwide also, then at some point we may see regional conflict in the Middle East, which will be devastating for everybody, for Middle Eastern countries and for world economy and for countries all around the world. RIA Novosti is reporting that Shiite militant groups in Iraq did made statements that they targeted the U.S. military base in Erbil airport area. Well, this is not the first and definitely not the last strikes on U.S. military bases in Iraq and Syria. And as long as at least this conflict escalation in Gaza Strip continues, I guess U.S. military bases will be primary target for these militia groups that are operating in Syria and Iraq. RT is reporting that U.S. Navy intercepts Iran's drone in the Persian Gulf. No surprises here. A few days ago, I did share on my Telegram this video footage when Dwight Eisenhower aircraft carrier with the company of other ships did pass through Hormuz Strait and enter Persian Gulf. And of course, Iranian side will closely monitor movement of this strike group. And a few days ago, I did share information that Iranian officials did warn USA to always keep in mind that they are in the range of Iran's missiles in any point in the Persian Gulf. And you know, let's hope things not go further than warnings. Sides can warn each other as much as they like, but let's hope there will be no military confrontation between Iran and US forces or Iran and Israel, because it will definitely devastate the entire region and the world also. Let's continue. RT is reporting that dozens of US soldiers want to overthrow government, according to Pentagon. Well, let me read a few sentences here. Extremism in the ranks remains a troubling trend for the U.S. military, as evidenced by the fact that 78 service members were suspected of being advocates for the overthrow of their own government. Annual Pentagon report has revealed. A report released this week also showed that 44 service members were suspected of supporting or engaging in terrorism in the past year. Overall, 183 allegations of extremism across the branches of America's military marked and the 25%, which is a 25% increase from the previous year level. So news is interesting, not because there is any significant threat that there will be some military coup in US or something like that. No, of course not. But news is interesting, especially because there is increase in US militaries when some people are crossing some boundaries. And maybe that has everything to do with the current administration of Biden, which is most danger for US than anything else in this world. In my understanding, and our friends from US can share their opinion, my understanding is that Biden's administration is the worst what happened to US for I don't know, for many decades, dear friends. And why you need enemies when you have such a government, really, that destroys state from within? I don't know. And maybe militaries are also humans, isn't it? They have feelings, they have their political views, and they may disagree with what is happening in US. They see deterioration of morality in the society, deterioration of principles. They see that traditions have been abused, almost on state level. Not almost, but definitely on state level, because just recently, very same Pentagon, there was information that intelligence services, intelligence branches and military branches are spending millions and millions to introduce to these institutions this some woke crazy ideology. And well, I can quite understand that not everybody is happy about it, you know. So let's continue anyway. RIA Novosti is reporting that well, this is quite interesting, dear friends. I'm gonna translate these several sentences to be more precise because there's plenty of numbers here. And news is very interesting because since the beginning of special military operation, US energy companies benefit tremendously by selling the LNG to Europe. And let me read now. So since the February 2022, the United States has supplied the European Union with liquefied natural gas worth almost 66.7 billion euros, while without the influence of anti-Russian sanctions, American companies would have received 52.2 billion euros less. RIA Novosti calculated according to Eurostat data. According to agency, in the 20 months from February 2022 to September 2023, the European Union purchased approximately 61 billion cubic meters of gas from American companies for 66.7 billion euros, or average of 3.1 billion cubic meter for 3.3 billion euros per month. So, by the way, if not this sanctioned war against Russia, US energy companies will receive 52.2 billion euros less than they did since the beginning of special military operations. So they did benefit quite much, isn't it? Because I remember times just several years ago when US energy companies that were operating in the in fracking, in field of fracking, almost all of them were on the verge of bankruptcy because their LNG was too expensive to compete on the world market. Because this technology, fracking, is somewhat expensive, and gas from fracking and oil from fracking is also expensive. But what happened then? US destroyed, Biden's administration conducted act of international terrorism and destroyed Nord Stream pipelines, Nord Stream 2 pipelines, both pipes, and on Nord Stream 1 pipelines, one was destroyed, one still remains operational, as I understand. And after that, of course, the sanction wars, by the way, sanction wars, as a result of which Washington basically forced EU member states to say no on cheap Russian pipeline gas. And eventually they did begin buying this expensive, significantly expensive LNG from US. And these companies, by the way, in US that are operating in fracking, that are exporting gas, LNG, mainly using fracking technology, these companies become super successful. And just look at the numbers, man. 50 billion euros is money for any sector of economy in any country, isn't it? And this is, by the way, one of the reasons, not the major reason why US and why Washington and London, or let's say ruling class of the elite, provoked this conflict in Ukraine. This is just sideline effect of it, because major reasons were different: to demonize Russia, to force EU member states, or NATO member states, to significantly increase military spendings, and basically to build this iron curtain between Russia and Europe, so that European states will lose even theoretical chance to maintain any independence from the dominance of Washington or London, by cutting all the ties with, or almost all the ties with Russia. But of course, this type of stuff, man, is a sideline effect that benefits also Washington and US economy. Let's continue. RT is reporting that export of Russian grain to EU has surged. Quite interesting news. I was kind of surprised when I see it. So EU has significantly increased imports of Russian grain despite the bloc's sanctions against the country, RIA Novosti reported on Saturday, citing statistics agency Eurostat. According to reports, in September, EU increased imports of Russian grain by 22% month-on-month basis, up to 180,000 tons, roughly 10 times what had been brought from Russia during the same period last year. This was the highest figure since the start of the Ukraine conflict and subsequent Western sanctions war on Russia. So, well, I don't know what happened, but EU states are now increasingly buying Russian grain. Maybe because grain from Ukraine is, is so poor of quality that they cannot use grain from Ukraine. That's possibility. Or maybe they have some other reasons. Maybe there is not enough grain in Europe. Who knows? But for whatever reason, they are increasingly buying Russian grain, which is good for Russian economy, by the way. So I have no issues with that. Let them buy any amount of Russian grain or any other product from Russia. RT is reporting that the EU steps up imports of Russian nuclear fuel. Also interesting topic. EU has stepped up imports of nuclear fuel and services from Russia over the past 2 years, despite the sanctions and the export curbs targeting the country in connection with the Ukrainian conflict. Reuters reported on Friday, citing the Euratom Supply Agency. According to report, the bloc countries to rely on supplies to operate Russian designed VVER reactors used by Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Finland, Hungary, and Slovakia. Well, when it comes to Hungary and Slovakia, these countries never hide from public that they are totally against sanctions on Russia, and especially sanctions. When it comes to Slovakia, I'm talking about this latest government, by the way. Previous government was very different, very anti-Russian and very Russophobic, but new government is somewhat different and acting differently, and definitely are leaving impression of adequate people, at least for now. But anyway, Hungary for sure, since the beginning of this escalation between Russia and Western ruling class, was always opposing sanctions, sanction wars, and especially sanctions on the nuclear sector of Russian economy. And one of the main reasons was that they have Russian designed nuclear reactors. And to operate those reactors, they need fuel from Russia, and they need services from Russia. Same goes for Slovakia, but when it comes to Czech Republic, Finland and Hungary, they may are buying goods and services from Russia, but still they are acting extremely anti-Russian and Russophobic, which is quite unfortunate, really. Which is quite unfortunate because in this particular case, all three countries, in my understanding, we should have great relationships between each other. I mean, I would love to see Russia having great relationships with everybody, but in this particular case, we are talking about, in this news, about Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Finland, Hungary and Slovakia, and from these 5 countries, Russia has good working relationships just with the Hungary. Maybe relationships will improve with Slovakia if current new government will continue in this its policies to somewhat de-escalate with Moscow. But unfortunately, with Finland, Bulgaria and Czech Republic, relationships are, I mean, too bad. And not because of Moscow, by the way, but because of these Russophobes in the governments of these countries. But anyway, this is it for now. Hopefully you will find this update interesting, and if so, please dear friends, click that like button and leave some commentary about any topic you like. More likes and comments are only way we have to fight back YouTube's immensely unfair and aggressive algorithm. And if you can, please share links to my videos or my channel with your friends on any of the platforms that you are active on, or in real time, because that's the only way that how we can reach a wide audience, because unfortunately YouTube algorithm very rarely shows my channel or my videos in recommendation section to people that may have interest in the news in general, and in news and the commentary from Russia in particular. And dear friends, if you find this channel interesting, informative, useful, please consider to and informative, please consider to support my work with small donations through PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, or by subscribing to my Patreon page. You can see links on this video in the description box or in the pinned comment. This is it for now. Once again, have a great weekend, and dear friends, I hope you will find time to join live stream today, 7 o'clock at evening Moscow time. So see you then. Thank you very much for your attention.